I never thought I'd see the day when my own blood would erase me from existence. But there I stood, 47 years old, staring at the barn wall where our family brand had hung for 3 generations. The Circle MJ was still there, burned deep into that old piece of oak my grandfather had mounted in 1952. But the J, my initial, my father's promise that this land would be mine someday, had been ground away, leaving only raw wood and the bitter taste of betrayal. My brother Marcus stood behind me, his boots scraping against the concrete floor. "It's just business, Jake," he said, but his voice carried the weight of guilt. "The lawyers said it was cleaner this way, simpler for the inheritance." Simpler. 47 years of sweat, blood, and broken bones reduced to a legal convenience. I'd been the one who stayed when Marcus went off to college. I'd been the one who sat with Dad through his final months, listening to his stories about building this ranch from nothing. And now, 3 months after we buried him, I was nothing more than a hired hand on my own land. The afternoon sun slanted through the barn door, casting long shadows across the floor where I'd learned to rope cattle as a boy. Every board, every nail in this place held my memories. But memories don't hold up in court, and family loyalty doesn't pay legal fees. I touched the scarred wood where my initial used to be, feeling the rough edges under my fingertips. "You're right, Marcus," I said quietly. "It is just business." But as I walked away from that barn, something cold and determined settled in my chest. If they wanted to play business, I'd show them what real business looked like. That night, I sat in my truck on the hill overlooking our ranch, their ranch now, and watched the lights flicker on in the main house. The house where I'd grown up, where Dad had taught me to read cattle futures and weather patterns with equal skill. Marcus had moved his family in the day after the funeral, like he'd been waiting for the old man to die. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Not just the legal maneuvering, but the way they'd all looked at me during the reading of the will, like I was the problem. Like I was the one who'd somehow failed the family by staying, by sacrificing my own dreams to keep the ranch running, while Marcus built his law practice in Denver. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through property listings. If they thought erasing my name would erase me, they were about to learn otherwise. Dad had taught me that land was the only thing that mattered in this business. You can lose cattle, you can lose equipment, but you hold on to the land, he'd always said. Land is legacy. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Marcus had been learning contract law, I'd been learning every inch of this county. I knew which parcels were struggling, which owners were behind on taxes, which families were one bad season away from selling. I knew because I'd helped them, lent them equipment, shared resources the way neighbors used to do. Now, that knowledge would serve a different purpose. I opened my laptop and began researching business registration procedures. If the Morrison family didn't want Jake Morrison anymore, then Jake Morrison would build something bigger than the Morrison family ever dreamed. The first step was simple: register a new cattle brand, something that would make them remember what they'd thrown away. The county clerk's office smelled like old paper and bureaucracy, but to me, it smelled like opportunity. Mrs. Henderson had been processing brand registrations for 30 years, and she knew every family's history in the county. "Jake Morrison," she said, looking up from her computer, "heard about the troubles with your family's ranch. I'm sorry, honey. Your daddy was a good man." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I'm here to register a new brand." She raised an eyebrow. "Starting your own operation?" "Something like that." I slid the paper across her desk. On it, I'd drawn my design, a circle with a deliberate break in it, and inside the letters BC, Broken Circle Ranch. She studied it for a moment, then looked up at me with understanding in her eyes. "That's powerful symbolism, Jake. You sure about this?" I've never been more sure of anything. As she processed the paperwork, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about rebuilding, about proving that sometimes what breaks you can make you stronger. "There's something else," I said. I want to file articles of incorporation for Broken Circle Holdings LLC. Mrs. Henderson's fingers paused over the keyboard. Holdings company? That's ambitious. My father always said think big or go home. Well, they sent me home. Now I'm thinking bigger than they ever imagined. The paperwork took 2 hours. When I walked out of that office, I wasn't just Jake Morrison, the disinherited son. I was the founder and CEO of Broken Circle Holdings, with a registered cattle brand and a business license that would let me operate anywhere in the state. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time since Dad's funeral, I felt like myself again. Broken, maybe, but not beaten. The Hendricks place had been struggling for 2 years. Tom Hendricks was a proud man, third-generation rancher like myself, but pride doesn't pay the bills when drought kills your hay crop and cattle prices drop. I'd helped him through the worst of it, lending him equipment and labor when he needed it. Now I sat across from him in his kitchen, watching his wife Sarah pour coffee with shaking hands. The foreclosure notice lay on the table between us like a death sentence. "I can't take charity, Jake," Tom said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "We've been over this. This isn't charity, Tom. It's business." I pulled out the contract I'd had drawn up. "Broken Circle Holdings wants to purchase your ranch. Full asking price, plus enough to clear your debts and give you a fresh start." Tom's eyes widened. "Jake, you don't have that kind of money." "Actually, I do." It was true. While Marcus had been spending his inheritance on a bigger house and newer trucks, I'd been living in the old foreman's cabin and banking every penny Dad had left me. "But here's the thing. I want you to stay on as ranch manager. Same house, same work, but now you're working for me instead of the bank." Sarah started crying. Not the bitter tears of defeat, but the relieved sobs of someone who'd been drowning and suddenly found solid ground. "Why?" Tom asked. "Why would you do this?" I thought about the brand on the barn wall, the name that had been erased. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything that matters, and because I believe in second chances." The paperwork took a week to finalize. When it was done, Broken Circle Holdings owned its first property, 2,400 acres of prime grazing land, complete with water rights and mineral rights that Tom didn't even know he had. More importantly, I'd saved a family and gained my first ally. Word travels fast in ranch country. Within a month of the Hendricks purchase, my phone was ringing constantly. Struggling ranchers, desperate farmers, families who'd heard that Jake Morrison was buying land and keeping people on. The Kowalski Dairy Farm was next. Third-generation Polish immigrants who'd built something beautiful from nothing, but couldn't compete with the corporate dairies moving into the region. I bought them out for twice what the corporations were offering and set them up as managers of Broken Circle dairy operations. Then came the Martinez Sheep Ranch, the old Peterson wheat farm, and the abandoned Murphy spread that had been sitting empty since the old man died and his kids moved to California. Each purchase was strategic, each property connected to the next, creating a growing network of land under the Broken Circle brand. But it wasn't just about accumulating property. Every family I helped became part of something bigger. Tom Hendricks started coordinating between the different operations, sharing equipment and labor. The Kowalskis began supplying fresh dairy products to the other ranches. Maria Martinez's sheep provided wool that Sarah Hendricks turned into crafts sold at the county fair. We were building something that hadn't existed in this county for decades, a community that worked together instead of just competing. Marcus called me one evening, his voice tight with confusion. "Jake, what the hell are you doing? People are saying you're buying up half the county." "Just business, Marcus," I said, echoing his words from that day in the barn. "Thought you'd appreciate that." "This isn't some game, Jake. You're making people nervous." "Good," I said, and hung up. The truth was, I was making myself nervous too. But I was also making something that felt like home again. 6 months into building Broken Circle Holdings, I was standing in the Hendricks kitchen again, but this time for Sunday dinner. It had become a tradition, all the families who worked for Broken Circle gathering once a week to share a meal and plan the week ahead. Tom's son, Billy, who'd been ready to leave for the city before I bought the ranch, was excitedly explaining his plans for a new irrigation system. Maria Martinez was teaching Sarah Hendricks basic Spanish while they cooked together. The Kowalski kids were playing with the Peterson grandchildren in the yard. This wasn't what I'd planned when I started buying land. I'd been thinking about revenge, about showing my family what they'd lost. But somewhere along the way, revenge had transformed into something else entirely. "Jake," Sarah Hendricks said, pulling me aside after dinner, "I need to tell you something. Before you bought our place, Billy was talking about enlisting, said there was nothing for him here. Now look at him." I watched the young man sketching irrigation plans with his father, their heads bent together over the kitchen table. "He's got good ideas," I said. "He's got hope," Sarah corrected. "We all do, because of what you built here. This isn't just business anymore, is it?" She was right. Somewhere between the legal documents and property acquisitions, I'd accidentally created what my family's ranch used to be before lawyers and inheritance disputes tore it apart. I'd created a place where people mattered more than profit margins. That night, driving home to my cabin, I passed the old Morrison Ranch. The lights were on in the main house, but the barns looked empty. Marcus had sold most of the cattle to pay for his legal fees and his new lifestyle. The irony was perfect. In trying to cut me out, they'd cut out the heart of what made the ranch work. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October. Mrs. Henderson from the county clerk's office, her voice excited in a way I'd never heard before. "Jake, you need to get down here. Now." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Just get down here." I found her in the records room, surrounded by old survey maps and property deeds. Her eyes were bright with discovery. "I was updating the tax records for all your new properties," she said, "and I noticed something strange. Do you know what you actually own?" "About 8,000 acres across 12 properties," I said. "Why?" She spread a county map across the table with all my properties marked in red. "Look at this, Jake. Really look at it." I stared at the map, and slowly the pattern became clear. My properties formed an almost perfect circle around the center of the county. But more than that, they controlled something I hadn't realized: water rights. Every major water source in the county either flows through your land or originates on it, Mrs. Henderson said. "The Morrison Ranch, your brother's place. It depends on water that crosses 3 of your properties to reach them." The magnitude of what I'd accidentally accomplished hit me like a physical blow. "How is that possible?" "Your father knew," she said quietly. "Look at this." She pulled out a folder of old documents. "He filed water rights claims on all these properties back in the 1980s. Never acted on them, but they're still valid. And now you own them all." I sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Dad had been planning this for decades, quietly securing water rights across the county. He'd known that whoever controlled the water would eventually control everything else. "There's more," Mrs. Henderson said. "The mineral rights surveys from the 1990s. Oil and gas reserves under 4 of your properties. Enough to make you independently wealthy even without the ranching." My father hadn't just built a ranch. He'd built an empire and hidden it in plain sight. Marcus showed up at my cabin that evening, his face pale and his hands shaking. He'd clearly been drinking, but his eyes were sharp with desperate clarity. "You son of a bitch," he said, standing in my doorway. "You planned this whole thing. Come in, Marcus. We need to talk." He stumbled into my small living room, looking around at the simple furniture and bare walls. "Living like a monk while you buy up the county. Very clever." "I didn't plan anything," I said. "I just started buying land from people who needed help." "Bullshit." He pulled out a folder of documents. "I had my lawyers research your purchases. You control the water rights to half the county, including our ranch." "Dad's ranch." "Your ranch," I corrected. "Remember? You took my name off the brand." Marcus collapsed into my old recliner, suddenly looking older than his 50 years. "We're going to lose everything, Jake. The bank called today. Without guaranteed water access, they're calling in our loan. I poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed him one. Why did you do it, Marcus? Why cut me out? He was quiet for a long time, staring into the amber liquid. Because I was scared, he finally said. Scared that you were better at this than me. Scared that Dad loved you more because you stayed. Scared that I'd made the wrong choice leaving. So you decided to make sure I had no choice but to leave too. Yeah. His voice was barely a whisper. And now we're both going to lose everything Dad built. I walked to the window and looked out at the lights scattered across the valley. Each light represented a family I'd helped, a community I'd accidentally created while trying to heal my own wounds. Maybe, I said. Or maybe we can build something better than what Dad had. Marcus looked up at me, hope and suspicion warring in his eyes. What do you mean? I mean it's time for the Morrison brothers to have a real conversation about the future. The next morning, I drove to the old Morrison ranch for the first time since the day they'd erased my name. The place looked tired, worn down by neglect and financial stress. The barns needed paint, the fences needed repair, and the pastures were overgrazed. Marcus met me at the front door looking like he hadn't slept. His wife Jennifer stood behind him, her face tight with worry. I've been thinking about what you said, Marcus began, but I held up my hand. Let me talk first. I pulled out a folder of documents I'd prepared. Broken Circle Holdings is prepared to make an offer for the Morrison Ranch, full market value, enough to clear all your debts. Jennifer gasped, but Marcus just stared at me. And then what? We become your employees like the Hendricks family? No, I said. You become my partners. I spread the documents across the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten breakfast as boys, where Dad had taught us to read cattle futures and weather reports. I'm proposing a merger. Morrison Ranch becomes part of Broken Circle Holdings, but you retain a 40% stake. You handle the legal and business side. I handle operations and expansion. We rebuild this place together. Marcus studied the papers, his lawyer's mind working through the details. This is generous, Jake. Too generous. What's the catch? No catch, just conditions. I pointed to a specific clause. The Morrison family name goes back on the brand. Circle MJ, like it always was. And we do this right. No more cutting each other out. No more family politics. We build something Dad would be proud of. Jennifer started crying again, but these were different tears than I'd seen from Sarah Hendricks. These were tears of relief, mixed with shame. Jake, she said, we don't deserve this. Not after what we did to you. Maybe not, I said. But Dad always said family was more important than being right. Took me a while to understand what he meant. Marcus looked up from the documents, his eyes wet. Why? After everything we did, why would you do this? I thought about the Sunday dinners at the Hendricks place, about Billy's irrigation plans and Maria's sheep and the community that had grown around Broken Circle. Because I learned something these past months. Revenge feels good for about 5 minutes, but building something that lasts? That feels good forever. The merger took 3 months to finalize, but the real work started immediately. Marcus threw himself into the business side with the same intensity he'd once used to cut me out. He renegotiated contracts, streamlined operations, and set up distribution networks that connected all our properties into a single, efficient operation. I focused on what I did best, the land and the people. We repaired fences, upgraded equipment, and implemented sustainable grazing practices across all our holdings. More importantly, we created jobs. Real jobs, with benefits and profit sharing. The kind of work that kept families in rural communities instead of driving them to the cities. The Sunday dinners moved to the main house at the old Morrison Ranch. Jennifer turned out to be a natural organizer, coordinating between the different families and operations. She started a community garden, organized bulk purchasing for supplies, and even set up a small school for the ranch children. But the real transformation was in Marcus. Watching him work with Tom Hendricks on irrigation systems, Seeing him help Billy Peterson with college applications, I saw glimpses of the brother I'd grown up with. The brother who'd taught me to ride, who'd stood up to bullies at school, who'd cried with me when our mother died. "You know what the irony is?" Marcus said one evening, as we sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "I spent all those years in Denver trying to build something important, something that mattered. But this, what we're doing here, this is what actually matters." "Dad knew," I said. "That's why he stayed. That's why he wanted us both to stay." "I'm sorry, Jake, for all of it. For being scared, for being selfish, for almost destroying what he built." I looked out at the valley, at the lights beginning to twinkle in the houses scattered across our land. Families settling in for the evening, children doing homework, parents planning for tomorrow. "You didn't destroy it," I said. "You just gave me a reason to make it bigger." The Broken Circle brand was now burned into fence posts across 12,000 acres, but the circle wasn't broken anymore. It was complete. A year after the merger, Broken Circle Holdings had become the largest employer in the county. We ran cattle, sheep, dairy operations, and had even started a small wind farm on the Peterson property. The mineral rights I'd inherited were providing steady income that we reinvested in the community. Better schools, a new medical clinic, and a cooperative store that kept money local instead of sending it to distant corporations. But the real measure of our success wasn't in the financial reports Marcus prepared each quarter. It was in the stories. Billy Hendricks had graduated from agricultural college and come back to implement water conservation systems that were being studied by universities across the state. Maria Martinez's daughter had started a fiber arts business that employed a dozen local women. The Kowalski's youngest son had opened a veterinary practice that served the entire county. We'd created something that hadn't existed in rural America for decades, a place where young people could build a future without leaving home. The old Morrison brand still hung in the barn, but now it was surrounded by photos and awards, pictures of our families, certificates recognizing our environmental stewardship, articles from agricultural journals about our innovative cooperative model. "Dad would have loved this," Marcus said, standing beside me in the barn where it all started. The scar where my name had been ground away was still visible, but now it looked like what it was, evidence of healing rather than evidence of hurt. "He did love this," I said. "He planned for this. All those water rights, all those mineral claims. He knew someday we'd need them. He was just waiting for us to be smart enough to work together." Marcus laughed. "Took us long enough. Some lessons take time to learn." We stood in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of a working ranch, cattle lowing in the distance, equipment being serviced, voices calling to each other across the yards, the sounds of a community that worked. Outside, the sun was setting over land that stretched to the horizon, land that belonged to us, but more importantly, land that we belonged to. The call came on a crisp morning in November, 2 years after I'd first walked away from that barn with my name erased. "Mrs. Henderson again, but this time her voice carried news that would close a circle I didn't even know was still open. "Jake, you need to see something. I found it in your father's safety deposit box, the one the bank just released to the estate." The envelope was thick, yellowed with age, and addressed in Dad's careful handwriting. "For my sons, when they're ready to understand." Inside were documents that made everything clear. Water rights claims dating back 30 years. Mineral surveys and geological reports, property assessments and strategic plans, and a letter, written in Dad's hand, dated just 6 months before he died. "Boys," it read, "if you're reading this, then you've probably made a mess of things and had to find your way back to each other. I hope it didn't take too long. I've spent 40 years building something bigger than a ranch. I've built a foundation for a community, a place where families can thrive for generations. But I've also watched too many ranch families tear themselves apart over inheritance and pride. Marcus, you have the education and business sense to make this operation profitable in the modern world. Jake, you have the heart and the knowledge to make it sustainable and meaningful. Apart, you'll both fail. Together, you can build something extraordinary. The water rights and mineral claims aren't just assets, they're insurance. Insurance against drought, against economic downturns, against the forces that have destroyed so many rural communities. Use them wisely. But remember this, land is just dirt and water and grass. What makes it valuable is the people who work it and the community they build together. Take care of the people, and the land will take care of itself. I love you both. Make me proud. Marcus read the letter twice, his hands shaking. He knew, he whispered. He knew we'd screw it up. He knew we'd figure it out, I corrected. Eventually. We sat in the lawyer's office, surrounded by the evidence of our father's faith in us, and I realized something profound. My revenge against Marcus hadn't been buying up the county or controlling the water rights. My revenge had been proving that we were better together than apart, that family was stronger than pride, that building something was more satisfying than tearing something down. The best revenge, it turned out, was no revenge at all. It was forgiveness, partnership, and the patient work of creating something worth inheriting. 5 years after they erased my name from the brand, I stood in the same barn, but everything had changed. The old brand was still there, but now it was part of a wall of history. Photos, awards, newspaper clippings, and stories from 5 generations of the Morrison family, and the dozens of families who now called Broken Circle home. The newest addition was a plaque, installed just that morning. Broken Circle Holdings, founded 2019, where community comes first. Below it, in smaller text, in memory of William Morrison, who taught us that the strongest circles are the ones that can bend without breaking. Marcus found me there, as I knew he would. It had become our tradition. Every anniversary of Dad's death, we'd meet in this barn and remember how far we'd come. The Peterson boy got into agricultural engineering at State, he said, settling against the workbench where we'd learned to repair equipment as children. Billy Hendricks is engaged to Maria's daughter, I added. They want to build a house on the old Murphy place. And the Kowalski Dairy just signed a contract to supply 3 counties. We recited the good news like a prayer, a litany of lives improved and dreams realized. It had become our way of honoring Dad's memory, not with grief, but with evidence that his vision had grown beyond anything he'd imagined. You know what I realized, Marcus said. When I took your name off that brand, I thought I was protecting the family legacy, but I was actually destroying it. Legacy isn't about names on brands or deeds in filing cabinets. It's about what you build that lasts after you're gone. I looked around the barn, at the evidence of everything we'd built together. Dad knew that. That's why he left us the tools but made us figure out how to use them. Think he'd be proud? I think he's probably laughing at how long it took us to get here. Outside, the sounds of a working ranch filled the evening air. Children playing, adults calling to each other, equipment humming with productive purpose. The sounds of a community that worked because people chose to make it work. The Broken Circle brand was burned into fence posts across 15,000 acres now, but the circle was no longer broken. It was complete, strong, and growing. And at its center, where it had always been, was the simple truth Dad had tried to teach us from the beginning. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people you choose to build something with, the community you create, and the legacy you leave for the next generation. My name was back on the brand, but more importantly, it was written in the lives of everyone who called this place home.